Hi, good morning everyone. So, a quick one. I just want to make this video. I want to rush through it before head down to the business of the day. Now, I'm compared to make this video because of what I've observed the past few days. Now, this conversation about GMOs and the conversation about GMOs that have been coming up and that have been gaining traction. And the truth is, I'm actually happy about it because of the fact that finally we are actually talking about it because it's that important. But before I go on, let me first of all apologize for the background and perhaps the background noise. This is the best I could get for now, but I admonish you that you just pay attention to what I have to say. Now, when the conversation about GMOs came up, it was more of, sorry. Okay, so when the conversation about GMOs came up, our forefathers were indicted in the conversation, and in the sense that they were, well, let's put the word accused now. Let me use the word accused. They were accused of practicing genetic modification for time past, that they've been practicing it. Now, people do not understand what genetic modification means and what our forefathers actually did. But before I talk more in depth into it, let me explain two things. One, I will explain reproduction in plants, and at the same time, when I finish that one, I will explain what I will talk about Mendelian inheritance. That is the process of inheriting genes and what it is. From there, I will make my point. Now, first of all, how plants reproduce. We have, if I remember correctly from biology, we have sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Now, under sexual reproduction, which is the main thing that actually, the main way that plants actually reproduce, we have, self-pollination and cross-pollination. Now, self-pollination is when a particular plant produces a flower. Now, there is a pollen in that flower. There is anther and the stigma. Now, the anther is the male structure, reproductive structure, while the stigma is the female structure, something like that. Yeah. Now, the pollen is the sex cell or something like that. So when it produces from the anther of that flower, if it falls on the female reproductive part of that same flower, that is self-pollination. So there is no, the organ doesn't leave that same plant. Everything happens in that same plant. That's why it is called self-pollination. So, but cross-pollination or cross-fertilization is when the same thing happens, but instead of it happening in the same plant, it goes to another plant, which means the pollen of one plant leaves one plant and goes to another plant of the same species. I don't know if you understand now. So let's assume you have two oranges in a particular land or a compound. Now, if the pollen of the flower of one orange, or let's say orange A, goes to the flower of orange B, that one is cross fertilization. Now, that could only happen when there is an agent that actually carries it, and some of these agents can be wind can be one. Wind can actually transfer it. Bird can actually do it too. Bird are actually a vehicle, and also human can also be a vehicle that could do it. Now, what our forefathers did, when the people kind of trying to pin on them as doing genetic modification right on time is this. Let's call a man who existed long ago. Let's say it's AB. His name is AB, and he has two oranges in his compound. He has, let's say, orange A, or tree. Let's say tree A has a sweet fruit, but the size of the fruit is small. That's orange A. And he has another one, orange B. It's not as sweet as orange A, but the fruit is large. Now, for the AB can just decide that, okay, since I have two trees in my compound, I desire the one that has sweet. The fruit is small, but I also desire it to be. I desire the one that is big. I desire the one that is big, the one that has big fruits, but the taste is not that sweet. So, what do I do? Let me find a way to see if I can get a fruit that has a combination of the two. So what the man will do is this: when it's time for the breeding season, when the plant is not producing flowers, what he will do is he will dust off the pollen of that tree A and take it to that tree B and dust it on tree B. So when tree B now start producing fruit, it will now produce fruit that combine the trait of tree A and that of tree B. So in that case, tree B will now have fruit that is big in size and sweet. It may also produce fruit also that are small in size and not as sweet as that one. So it has different fruit that combine those traits. So it combines the trait from the two trees. Now what he will do again is this: since he has already gotten a fruit that is now big and sweet, he will now collect the seeds from the hybrid that is not produced now. He will now collect the seed and replant it. So when that one is not reproducing, that one may likely do a self-pollination later and reproduce that fruit all over and all over again. That is fertilization, and that is what our forefathers did. Now it is not even different from what, now that this is where I'm coming now, coming to talk about Mendelian inheritance. The man who studied genetics, they call him the father of genetics. His name is Gregor Mendel. Yes, that's his name, Gregor Mendel. And the way he studied genetics in the beginning was, at the time he did, was also the same way that I'm explaining now. Yes, it was also the same way that I'm explaining now. Now, when Gregor Mendel is a monk, when he wanted to study this thing, first he did it in nature. He studied it in this same way, by taking the pollen from one flower and dusting it on another. So what he produced, the hybrid he produced, that is the offspring he produced, he replanted them, repeated the same thing again, and he came out with 3 good laws. 1, the law of segregation of genes. 2, the law of independent assortment of genes. Those are big language and all those one, but at least when you go back to study them, you understand it. Then the 3rd one was the law of dominance. Now, what our father Abi did when he produced hybrid, do you know that product, that big seed now with sweet fruits inside, that big fruit with that is not sweet, funny enough, it obeyed the natural law of inheritance. What do I mean? For the fact that it is now sweet, it doesn't mean it has eliminated the other genes. What I mean is, it doesn't mean that the gene for a smaller fruits is no longer there. It doesn't mean the gene for the not so sweetness is no longer there. The genes are there. The only thing is that it is not expressed, it is hidden. So which means down the genetic line later, when the conditions are right, that thing can also be expressed again. Now, when the Mendel did his own, it's still the same thing that he did. So he didn't alter any gene, and that is why when he came out with his independent, one of the laws, when he came out with his conclusion, he found out that genes are transferred from one generation to another unaltered. So once one gene is not the fact that the gene is not expressed in a particular generation can actually be expressed in another generation when the gene is met, when the conditions are right. And that's why we have dominant genes and recessive genes. So a gene can be recessive even if it's not expressed in one generation. It doesn't mean that it's is no longer there. Now, if you talk about Mendelian inheritance, you cannot also shy away from what mutation is. So mutation is all just an abnormality, a change in a genetic sequence, which is not supposed to happen. Now, when you talk about genetic modification, genetic modification is a fancy name for genetic modification is a fancy name for human-induced genetic mutation. So it's like human changing it. Now, why genetic modification is very sinister and I will put in a very detailed. Let me just put in this point. Gregor Mendel, when he studied the law of genetics, he did it at a time when how will I put it now? He did it at a time when technology is not as advanced as now, where you can actually zoom in on the genetic makeup of a plant and see how it is. No, he did it at a time when technology is not that advanced, and he studied it in nature. And I believe that if Gregor Mendel was to still be alive today to study that law of genetics, he would have still done it in nature the way he did it before. The reason is because he will want to know, we want it to pass through a process where the law of nature, the tension of nature is revealed through the law of genetics. So you are not interfering with what nature is doing on its own. Now, the difference between what the father AB did with those two trees and what GMO is doing